Hi, my name's Rob Gelhausen. The following is an interview I did with Darla Markley of No Guilt Baking. Darla is the definition of inspiration. Not long ago, Darla was completely bound to a wheelchair, but she continues to defy what the doctors say is possible, in large part because of her entrepreneurial journey. Darla has taken a personal need and a passion and created an amazing company that offers incredible products which bring happiness and health benefits to a huge number of people. My hope is that this interview will serve as motivation and inspiration for other entrepreneurs as well as those considering entrepreneurship as a career path. Darla gives us an amazing amount of information that will be extremely helpful for anyone who is involved in their own startup. I hope you enjoy this interview. This interview was filmed at Catapult Lakeland. Catapult Lakeland is a community-centered co-working space located in Lakeland, Florida. Their focus is to foster the growth of startups in Central Florida and maintain their success through affordable membership, thoughtful education, and funding to drive local businesses forward. I'm here with Darla Markley, and I wanted to take a second and let her tell you about her business in her own words.
Well, my business started as a result of my husband's and myself's desire to do something about our own health, starting with nutrition, and it started out as a blog. We were doing the low-carb lifestyle, and I have a humongous sweet tooth, so I started a blog called Carb Junkie on Keto, and that evolved into doing some support groups to help other people do a low-carb lifestyle. And I kept hearing people say, there's just nothing out there that makes it easy. Everything has to be from scratch, and I just don't have time. So, being that my health had forced me into retirement, I thought, well, why can't I make something? So I started out with just a little cottage kitchen and making basically for friends and acquaintances that were part of the support group. And it was a huge hit. Pretty soon they were word of mouthing to other people, and I outgrew the stage where I could be a cottage kitchen and had to start looking into how to go commercial. So we ended up forming CJOK Kitchen LLC, which owns our brand, which is No Guilt Baking Company, and we make a line of low-carb, sugar-free, gluten-free, dry baking mixes, and we also locally sell fresh-made baked goods in the markets and in a couple of wholesale places that will be featuring us here shortly locally. So it evolved. All of our baked goods are made from our mixes, and we're growing by leaps and bounds. But that's how it started.
That's great. And I definitely wanted to talk to you more about your company and the products that you offer. I wanted to ask you first, if you could talk about the products that you offer a little bit more. So they're low carb, sugar free. Is there a particular diet that you're targeting, or what is motivating that?
Well, basically, the keto lifestyle, as a lot of people refer to it, that's just one of many ways to eat low carb, but most people know it by the keto diet. That's sort of the underpinning of it. The gluten-free comes from the fact that I actually have celiac disease and I have to be gluten-free. So even things that might be low carb that contain gluten, we don't use. So it happens to be gluten-free for people that are gluten-free. And we have people that are doing it for weight loss. There's people that are working to reverse type 2 diabetes, just feel better, to better mental clarity. And athletes are finding that it's beneficial in increasing their performance. So, I mean, it's actually becoming pretty popular across a really diverse group of people. So, we started out sort of targeting people that were keto low carb, but it's expanded to people that do paleo. There's a lot of the stuff that we make that they can eat.
Well, yeah, that's great, and especially in today's society, I think it's now it's 60% of people are overweight and 30% of people are obese. So, obviously, low carb, no sugar. What were the other specifications of the
It's
product?
also gluten free. We don't use any
Gluten-free.
products that are gluten, and we source out our ingredients are the highest quality that we can get for a good value for our customer, because we don't want to price it. You can get really highly priced ingredients that would maybe make it even more superior quality, but we try to balance that with what's economically feasible for the average person, because real people want to eat this way, and it needs to be affordable to them too. So I mean, that we always balance that. We source organic when we can, and definitely no GMOs. That's something that we're very adamant about. And my background is healthcare, so I'm pretty passionate, especially about diabetes education. I managed a diabetes education department at one point in my career, and I'm very passionate about helping people take control of their own wellness. And so that was another part of the impetus for why I went this direction with a food. I've always loved to cook and bake, so food is sort of a natural step for me, but to have it be specifically geared towards helping people achieve better wellness is really important to me.
That's great. And one of the questions that I always like to ask is of any entrepreneur that I meet is, what was the driving force behind becoming an entrepreneur for you? What was it? Life circumstance? Was it just your background? What?
I think it was a variety of things. Number one, my husband and myself, my husband co-owns the company.
Andy Markley.
Andy Markley. Mm-hmm. His parents are entrepreneurs. My parents have been entrepreneurs, so it wasn't something that seemed unachievable or insurmountable to become an entrepreneur. The other thing was, at the time that we sort of started out, I was not in as good a health as I am now. So being able to be an entrepreneur allowed me to adjust my hours to what I could tolerate. So that was part of it too, is being able to write my own hours. When I have energy, go like gangbusters, and when I don't have enough energy, to be able to say, today maybe we're not going to do so much.
So can you tell us what your own personal experience has been? You mentioned celiac disease. What has that been like, and how did that influence not only your product line, but your entrepreneurial endeavor?
Well, I think part of it stems from the fact that, I got diagnosed with celiac before it was, a big deal. So there were no products.
What is it exactly?
I'm allergic to gluten in any kind of grain.
Okay.
So I can't have anything that has, wheat, barley, all those fun things that we like for all of our baked goods. So I have been that person that would go to all these fairs and things, because my husband and I are foodies too, and we'd go places that were really great experiences, but I could never have. And I think sort of what drives me is knowing what that feels like, to go and smell all these wonderful foods and see all these beautiful presentations and not being able to partake.
Oh.
And I wanted to do something about that. I want people to feel like, oh, there is a place I can go. They have something I can eat, and it's pretty and it tastes good, and it's so that really does drive.
I can imagine there's a pretty big market for people that like to eat good food too.
Oh yeah, if it tastes good. And that's the other thing too, is a lot of times, especially early days of when gluten-free sort of started hitting mainstream, the products that came out were not tasty.
I've seen a lot of the reviews and researching for this interview. I have seen a lot of the reviews that people just cannot find good things out there.
Right.
And I did want to talk to you more about your message and what your biggest need as a business is. But if you could talk to me a little bit about what having a better diet has done for you personally, and what your journey has been up to this point.
Well, in 2009, I got transverse myelitis. It's an autoimmune thing that happens. It's really rare. It happened as a result of a required immunization that I had gotten for years. Working in healthcare, it was required. Never had a problem, but for some reason that one did it. And I actually woke up one morning and thought I had had a stroke because my whole left side was just unmovable. And that was pretty devastating to me because I was a very type A career-oriented person. I was on the fast track, actually was in a program completing my doctorate at the time that I got sick. And so when all that ended, it was pretty devastating. And I've spent the last many years trying, struggling, striving to get better and push beyond what the doctors said that I would get back, because I'm stubborn.
You're an entrepreneur.
I am tenacious, yes. And that does help in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But anyway, it wasn't until we switched to the low-carb way of eating, and we did it actually, like I said before, for my husband, and I just was kind of on board because I didn't want to cook two different ways. And suddenly I started getting more energy. I went from 2 years ago being completely wheelchair bound to I get up and walk around on forearm crutches. I use a walker somewhat, but there's even times when I park it, and as long as there's something for me to hang on to, like in the kitchen, I buzz around those tables without anything anymore. That to me is what convinced me that this is what I need to be passionate about, because if I got this kind of result when the doctors and everybody told me that, you just need to come to grips with this is the way your life is, and really struggling to try to accept that, to finding out that there was something I could do. And it's not that I believe that this lifestyle is going to cure everybody. I do not. I think what it does is it reduces inflammation in your body enough that your body can do for itself what it can. So do I think I'm going to be 100% someday? Not necessarily. But I am so grateful for what it's done for me. And so that makes me even more passionate about my product, because I know that it can help people. I don't make health claims as far as, selling the product to people. I tell my story when they ask, what it's done for myself and my husband, and kind of leave it to them to decide. But I want to be very supportive of people that are doing it for health reasons, because like I said, my background is healthcare, and I wouldn't have gone into healthcare if I didn't care about other people. So that's important to me.
Your story is truly amazing, Darla, and I think it is a great example of how not only can entrepreneurs better their own lives, but they can be an inspiration to other people. And one of the things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs experience is that entrepreneurial journey gives them something to live for lack of a better term. Gives them something to strive for, gives them something.
I think you're hitting on a really, really, really key point to entrepreneurship. Is being an entrepreneur should not be another job for you. If you're going to take this step, take this kind of risk, it really truly should be something that's near and dear to your heart, that you're passionate about, because it does take tenacity. It's not, every day is not easy. There's scary things around every corner that you're not sure if you're prepared for. I mean, growing. We just recently graduated out of kitchen incubator, and are in a full-fledged catering kitchen now. That was a scary move, but it was the logical next step if we want to continue to grow. So if it was not something that I was truly passionate about, those kind of scary risks might be overwhelming.
And I think that it's absolutely amazing. And you said it's been about 2 years now?
We are actually coming up, from the time we were incorporated, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. And so it's grown a lot faster than I anticipated. It could grow even faster if I wasn't as cautious as I am. I like to research every step, and sometimes it makes me hesitate a little bit in taking some really large steps. But I mean, we have some opportunities that are sitting in the offing that we have to make some decisions on that could catapult this thing bigger than I ever foresaw it becoming. So that is exciting, but it's also terrifying. So you're going to have to, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, you're going to have a little bit of courage and bravery too, because sometimes things, the path that you think you're starting on can take twists and turns, and you kind of got to make decisions on the fly about whether to pursue them or let them go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you were getting started, I think the first step of product viability, of actually knowing that the market was going to pay you for what you produced, happened pretty early for you. What advice would you have for an entrepreneur that has not gotten started yet, but is on the fence, thinking about it? They may be in a career that they just absolutely hate. They may want to provide a better life for their family. What would you say to that person who's thinking about entrepreneurship?
Well, the first thing I would say is, when in doubt, try it anyway, because you're never going to have anything that you decide to do in life that doesn't have some risk involved. So, but realizing that you can't just jump off into the deep end of the ocean necessarily and expect to survive, research is so key. Really understanding who is my customer and what am I doing for them. Because at the end of the day, they're the hero of your story. Whatever your story of your company is, you're making them the hero. So what does your product do for them that makes them the hero of their story? For me, it's they're taking control of their own health and wellness. They're able to have something, sweet or whatever that's still good for them, so that they can feel good about that. That makes them the hero. So you really need to understand your customer. Another thing that I learned really early on, I mentioned before that we've tried a couple of times to come up with a vegan product. Well, they have been spectacular failures. I don't, I'm not ashamed to admit it. So sometimes you have to realize that not every person is your customer too. So when you have those things that you realize, I can't provide this to this person, sometimes it's just admitting that that's not my customer, and that's okay. Not every person has to be your customer. So I think those things for me, if I had known those at the very beginning, would have been really helpful. I kind of already knew the whole risk thing, that you should try it anyway and mitigate as much risk as possible, but researching and knowing your customer and then realizing that not everybody is your customer is, I think, really key to starting out on a new adventure like this.
So you were talking about your customers and making your customers the focal point of every decision making. And obviously that's why Amazon is as big as they are. They've always thought about the customer first. Can you tell me a little bit more about the way in which you ask your customers for feedback so you can improve your products?
Well, I do a lot of one-on-one interaction at the market because I do still sell at the local farmers market. So I get to spend some time talking to my customers, and they've had a lot of feedback, even as so far as our packaging, input on what they thought looked nice, what didn't look nice, what they thought was an improvement, what wasn't an improvement. But we also, on the website, we have survey forms and things so that people can contact us and give us feedback anonymously in case they have something that they might think we take negatively, which that's really not what we're about, because for me, you can't improve unless you get the good and the bad, because sometimes you're so in the middle of it that you can't see the forest for the trees. So you think you're doing this phenomenal thing when in fact your customers are feeling like you've lost sight of what they want. So I think it's really important to have those feedback mechanisms, because you need to keep your finger sort of on the pulse of your customer base to make sure that you're not losing them in your pursuit of what you're doing and trying to grow and expand, and what you think makes things better isn't always what they perceive makes things better. So I think that's really, really key, is to have those surveys and mechanisms and feedback forms. And we've even done little things where, put your feedback in the bucket and win a mix, to encourage people to give us feedback.
And from what I understand, the feedback that you have gotten has been very positive.
It's been very positive. We did the Taste to Catapult, which had some objective people come in that don't necessarily even adhere to the lifestyle that we're promoting. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised that 5 stars across the board for taste, flavor. The only sort of feedback that we got was based on packaging and presentation, which were things that for me, I was so in the heat of it that I didn't look at those things as being as important as they really are. And so we started, sort of polling our customers about the feedback that we got from there, and found that they agreed that, the packaging was a little boring. It was not, it didn't catch their eye. It was more the fact that they knew how good it was that was bringing them back. So we were able to make changes based on that feedback, which would I have gotten there eventually? Maybe. But I got there much sooner because I was listening to the people that, are looking objectively at my product and are not invested in it.
So then how do you, and if the answer is we're still working on it, it's a great answer, but how do you get that message out of your inspirational story and your company and your business, what you guys are about, why you are trying to do what you're trying to do?
Well, in the beginning, I kind of held back on that because, I don't know, maybe some of it is the healthcare training of I'm the healthcare provider, not the patient. So a lot of times when you're in healthcare, you don't tend to talk about the fact that you're not feeling well or you're going through something or whatever. So at first I was very hesitant to share why I got into it. I also try to be really careful not to cross the line into making health claims about this is some kind of a healthcare nutritional supplemental kind of thing. But I found that people are genuinely drawn to why we're doing this, and it actually encourages them to take the risk. Maybe they've been thinking about doing low carb or thinking about going gluten free or whatever, and then they see how it benefited someone else, even though they don't know if they're going to get the same amount of benefit. It's just the fact that they can see that there are testimonials of people, and that somebody that is offering the product is using the product and is living what they're telling you. It's not like where you have somebody that's been thin their entire life trying to sell a diet supplement to you.
Right.
That kind of loses some of the force behind, even if it's a great product, that kind of diminishes it somehow. But because my husband and myself have used this lifestyle, are using these products daily, and are getting benefit from them, I think people are very interested in hearing our story, and so I'm getting a little more free with giving it. I actually did recently add it to a blog post on our website, so people can see where we're coming from. Also, too, the other thing I hadn't done before was really talk about the fact that I have a healthcare background. So I found that when I let people know that it lends credence to the fact that I've done my research and I know what I'm talking about as far as the nutritional side of what this does for people, and who it's safe for, who the research says that you probably better do this really closely with your doctor if you decide to do it. So I feel confident now that I can do that without feeling like I'm trying to I know what I'm talking about. That in the beginning,
yeah.
I'm not really a braggadocious kind of person. So
Sure.
For me, sometimes it's hard to talk about things that legitimately people may need to hear to understand that when I say this, that I'm not just making this up and making sort of woo-woo pseudoscience claims. I can give them research to go look at. I can tell them where to go to look at the most recent, articles, science articles that support what we're doing and whatnot. And so, yeah, I do talk about it more now. In the beginning, it was really hard for me to share that. I'm kind of a private person, and I don't want it to be about me either.
Sure.
That's the other thing is, yes, this is my business and my husband's business, but I'm doing it more because I've always felt the need to do something to help my fellow man. Whether it be health or community, whatever, both my husband and I are very motivated by that because we've been down in the down and out of time or two with what life has thrown at us, and we got through it because of others reaching out. So we want to be those people.
Yeah, and I completely hear where you're coming from. It is very inspirational. I think your message will help a lot of people. So I hope you continue to put yourself out there like that. And I appreciate you doing it here. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and ask you, as an entrepreneur, what is your biggest need right now?
My biggest need right now is to get enough steady income. We have the steady income source, but it isn't something that we can say, okay, on the 1st there's going to be this X amount of money come in, on the 15th there's going to be X amount of money come in. So trying to get revenue streams that are a little more stable so that I can hire the help that I need, because right now I am pretty much working at capacity of what I'm capable to do, and I have opportunities that are out there that by myself I'm not able to fulfill the obligation of taking those on, and I really want to take those on because I think it's exciting stuff, and I think it's the direction that the company needs to go. So our biggest need right now is to get to a point where I can reliably tell somebody, I'm offering you a job. It's going to be, and that's the other thing that's important to me is I really don't want to have to hire somebody in at minimum wage if I can avoid it, because nobody can live on minimum wage.
Right.
So, it may have to be that way based on, the financial being the fact that we're just a fledgling company, but definitely want to be able to scale up to where the people that work for me are making a livable wage, because that's important to me too.
Yeah. One of the things that I've given a heavy amount of thought to is internships. I think that I completely agree with you. It would be very hard for me to hire somebody at $8 an hour. I think that, and the only reason I mention is because maybe an entrepreneur might be watching this now, and an internship might be a good idea. You can get paid internships, and with the college credit, $8, $9, $10 an hour is a little more appealing. But what I did want to say is that having the problem of being at maximum capacity and needing more help is one that any entrepreneur would love to have, and I congratulate you on that. And so let me ask about this. Have you thought about taking investment funding, or
we've been pretty hesitant to do that, only well, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure if I can define in our conversations between my husband and myself why we've sort of tried to stay away from that. So far, we've been able to bootstrap, and I think if it ever push came to shove that we absolutely had to have investment funds, we would go down that road. But so far, at the pace that the business is growing, if we can continue to take on the projects that are opening themselves up for us to take on, it looks hopeful for me, looking at the financial projections, that we're not going to have to look for outside investors. We have a group of people that we're actually co-sharing our space with that are doing different things from us, but complementary things, and we all work really well together. So that has kind of helped mitigate for all of us the need to look for outside funds, because we're splitting costs on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the road that we've gone instead. So I mean, that's another thing. If somebody's looking to go into entrepreneurship, is to find people that are complementary, that perhaps you can, share spaces as you grow. That it's not going to be stepping on each other's toes, but more of a supportive environment. It also gives you a great resource for bouncing ideas. All of us that are in that particular area are all food businesses, so we've all gone down the road of inspections and licensing and permits, and how did you overcome this, and so I think a support network too is really important. So that's one way I think to avoid maybe having to go down the investor road, but it's not out of the question. We do have our next big purchase coming up, which is a filling machine for our dry mixes, which is a pretty significant investment. It may be that we have to seek some outside sources to be able to make that happen, but we'll see. We're pretty close. I've been, pinching the pennies and saving towards it. So,
and I think that's very smart. I think a lot of people hear about all of the angel investment going on in Silicon Valley, and they think that that's something that you have to do. But when you take on investors, you also take on people that you answer to.
Right.
And for my money personally, I would try to self-fund as much as possible. But
it's not
with the
always
reviews,
possible, right? I mean,
well, and with the reviews that I saw online about your products and the market that you serve and the people that you help, I think that if you did find yourself in a situation where one of the local supermarket chains or a bigger store, something like Walgreens, CVS, one of these bigger stores, how does that work? When they come along, they say, okay, we want to have you in 12 of our stores, and then if you do well, we'll have you in 200.
So we are in talks with a couple of different places. I'm actually a little more comfortable with the mom and pop places that are talking to me, because I feel like we can fulfill that like right now. But some of them are bigger, and if it goes to the point of we sign papers with one of these companies, we're probably looking at having to go to a co-packing type situation. Now,
and for the visitors, could you briefly explain co-packing?
Yeah, co-packing is you actually hire a warehousing facility that can produce in greater quantities and at greater speeds, and warehouse for you the amount of product. Typically, one run is about 500 pounds of product. So, I mean, it's not something you'd want to do if you're selling at the local farmer's market, because where are you going to store that 500 pounds of dry mix?
Sure.
And that's one mix. We actually have now 15 different mixes that we do. So, yeah, think about that for a minute. You're going to need a pretty good sized warehouse. But yeah, if we sign a contract with this bigger store that is in talks with us, it's going to become a requirement that we have that kind of capacity, because we're talking nationwide stores that are going to want to keep stocked in product, and there is no way, even if I hire someone, that I can, do one grocery store's demand, let alone a multinational company. So there's when it comes to food and going into co-packing, part of it is they take your product, they do what they call research and development to find out where they can source for the best price in great quantities. It depends on the co-packer how much say you get into what they do to your product. So that's another reason why I hesitate just a little bit, because while I would love to see anybody be able to go to their local supermarket and be able to buy products like this, I'm also concerned about preservatives and GMO, and I really don't want my product to evolve into sort of the generic garbage
like everything else that's out there.
Yeah, because then my product isn't any better than what you could just go down to the store and buy, and why would you want to pay more for it?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So what I hear you saying is that everybody wants to scale, but you got to scale the smart way.
you have to be smart about it. If you scale too fast and before you're ready, I mean, yes, this company talked to me, but it's in talks. And if I was to go out right now and get a co-packer and then they say, we talked about it and at this time we've decided not, well, then I've gotten all this upfront money that I put into research and development and all this product that I don't have a buyer for. So we're moving kind of slowly on this, and thankfully the company that I'm talking to is being very patient about that, and understands that as a newer startup that we don't want to get too big for our britches, so to speak, and
Absolutely.
end up with it shut down before we're to our second year because we overextended.
That's a great word, overextend. You overextend, you offer a sub-quality product or service,
Right.
and then, it
Right.
doesn't matter how big you can get if you don't have any customers.
Exactly. If they're not getting the quality that they're used to getting, then you're going to lose your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you had mentioned before the interview started is that there's not a whole lot of education out there for people in the food and services business that want to start up an entrepreneurial endeavor. Now, I think that there is a huge opportunity. Well, let me first say one thing. Catapult Lakeland, there are a lot of food service businesses here. If you are in the Lakeland, Tampa area, I highly recommend that you come check out Catapult, because to what Darla was saying earlier, the ability to network, the ability to talk to other entrepreneurs, the ability to share stories, show what's working, show what isn't. I mean, it's just absolutely invaluable. But I think there's a huge opportunity for people in the food and services business to start up social media channels, whether it be a YouTube channel, a Facebook page, to not only acquire customers, but those in and of themselves can become businesses. So I wanted to first kind of put an idea in your head, and second, I wanted to ask you what you did to educate yourself in an area where there's just not a whole lot of educational material available.
Well, made a lot of mistakes for one. Got some licenses and permits that I didn't need. That was money I didn't need to spend because I didn't know. I think really, really key for me was Catapult. Being able to come into an incubator space where they already understood the food business, which was not my background. My parents did own a restaurant, but it's much different being the child of the restaurant owners, that worked in the restaurant, versus understanding the permitting, the inspections, the all that goes into making a food business run. And coming into Catapult for me was huge because Maggie, who happens to be the head of the food services side, is very knowledgeable about this is the permits that you need. This is where you need to go to fill out the applications. This is how you go from cottage to commercial, and really sort of hand-holding right down to, it can be really confusing and scary to try to figure out how much do I charge. We all grow up looking for a value.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, that can cause you to shoot yourself in the foot because you're thinking, oh, wow, if I charge that, that's kind of expensive. But you have to look at, what did it cost you? What's your overhead?
You undervalue yourself?
You undervalue yourself. And I think it's very common, being that I'm in a network now of a lot of other food entrepreneurs.
Sure.
I can tell you it's a common theme that we all kind of started out way underpriced, to where if we hadn't gotten help along the way to really understand how to figure out what legitimate pricing is, and especially when you go from retail, you're thinking, okay, I'm making a little money here. The business has some money to grow and whatever. To suddenly you get somebody that says, so I would like to buy your product and put it in my coffee shop. well, now you're hit with this whole thing of, well, I only am making 50 cents, margin on this. Now, how do I come up with a wholesale price that makes it so they can make any money off of it too?
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that I learned through this support system of other food entrepreneurs, that you need to understand what it really costs you to make this product, what you need, and where you need some wiggle room, so that if you do have somebody that comes and says, I want to sell your product, that you have a point that you can give them where you're still going to, make some money, but they can make some money on it too, because they're not doing it just to help you. And I'm not saying there aren't people out there that will do it just to help you, but they need to keep their businesses going too. So you have to have enough margin to be able to, if you intend to allow somebody to buy wholesale, that you have any room at all to come up with a wholesale price that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's very common, where entrepreneurs, they undervalue themselves. They get stuck in a situation to where they don't have enough margin, and then something goes wrong, as it always does, and they're up to their neck in the red. I think pricing is one of the hardest things that an entrepreneur will ever figure out. And I think, like with a lot of other things in entrepreneurship, that you have to test. You have to test different price points to see what the market will actually accept. And in a lot of situations, they'll be willing to pay you a lot more than they thought they would.
Well, here's the thing that I have learned is always go on the high side of what you think you should sell it for. And the reason I say that is not to gouge your customer, but it's so much easier to lower your prices than it is to raise them.
Yep.
Because they
Great
notice.
point.
They'll come to you and they'll say, wait a minute, didn't I pay $8.95 for that when I bought it last time? Yeah.
Yep.
But if they're like, oh, wow, that was $9.95 last time, it's $8.95 now. Oh yeah, we had some, we got better sourcing on pricing, whatever, and we're able to pass that on to our customers. That reads much better than I had to raise the price because I started out too low.
I like it. I like it. That's great. So you talked a little bit about what your biggest need is. Is there something that you could point to that maybe you would have done differently if you had to start all over again as an entrepreneur?
I think I would have sought out an incubator in the very beginning. Part of what Catapult offered, and I know many other places do, I've seen it online, the co-starters class. Being able to do a class like that at the very beginning of what you're doing really helped us refine and get our message where what we were trying to say all along but didn't know how. A prime example, my blog was Carb Junkie on Keto. Well, we put it under the umbrella of another company that we own that happens to be my husband's software company. And when we went to see our tax attorney, he's like, oh, no, because the first person that comes in and says your mix poisoned them, they'll take his software.
Yep.
And not something we had thought of, we're just thinking, oh, we already have an LLC, we'll just do everything we're doing under one LLC. And so all of a sudden we needed to right now come up with another LLC name. So I went with CJOK, which is short for Carb Junkie on Keto. Worst decision ever. About the third time somebody called me C-Jock Kitchen, I was over it. I'm like, no, it's CJOK. And then they couldn't remember the order of the letters, CAOJK, So we're like, oh
funny.
boy, that was a really bad decision. So we started, after going through co-starters, we started thinking, what is our message? What are we trying to do for people? Well, it came down that, we really believe that everybody deserves to feel good about treating themselves. And that led into realizing that means you don't have to feel guilty. Well, that is how we got to the brand No Guilt Baking Company, which reads much better than C-Jock Kitchen.
Right.
So those are things that had we gone through a class like Co-Starters in the beginning, we might not have done some of that stumbling. that would have made us a little more visible. I mean, people would walk by our sign and not even see us at the market. Now they see no guilt and they do a double take. Why don't I have to feel guilty? And they stop and they're like, well, how come I don't have to feel guilty if I eat your stuff? And then I get a chance to talk to them. Sometimes they buy, sometimes they don't, but they think about it. And it stops people and gets them to interact, which I think is important, because even if they're not doing a lifestyle that our mixes support, a lot of times they're like, can I take your card? Because I know my friend is doing keto, or I know my mother-in-law just got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And, so even though they may not be my customer, the word of mouth, because they stopped and talked to us and wanted to know what we were about. So I think that is so key to making your business successful. You can have the best product in the world, but if you don't put the right name on it, people are not going to notice it, and they won't know about it. And that's so key to being successful as an entrepreneur, is not just making something that's really good. You've got to let people know you made something that's really good.
Yes, absolutely. So I think you made two really crucial points there. The first of which, legality. Make sure at the bare minimum you have an LLC and a business bank account. You don't want to be paying your business bills out of your personal checking account. So an LLC, personal banking account or business banking account, and branding. Make sure your brand says what you're about. Yeah,
exactly.
That's great. That's great. So what are your long-term goals? What are your long-term business goals, and how exactly did you formulate those?
Well, I did it the old-fashioned way. I sat down and did like a 5-year plan. But I had to sit down and say, in 5 years, where do I see this going, and why do I care? Because that's what fuels your passion. If you're just doing it because I'm bored and I wanted something to do, chances are pretty good in 5 years it's going to fizzle out, because you're going to lose interest, something else is going to strike your interest, or the hard work of the day-to-day of being an entrepreneur will get to you. However, if you're sitting down and you're visualizing, this is where I want to grow this is where I see it can go, and I'm committed to this, then it gives you the tenacity when you hit those bumps in the road, or you're too tired and you really don't want to go in the hot kitchen because it's already 90 degrees outside, and whatever the reasons are, you have that sort of that push to get you through. So in 5 years, I would like to see this business be supplying in a way that at the very least our local community can have access to our products anytime they want to go down and buy them.
And if you are an entrepreneur out there and you have already scaled a company like Darla's, please reach out.
Absolutely.
I think that would be absolutely wonderful to see something like that happen. I wanted to make the point that a lot of what we see on TV is tech startups. But you are proving, and a lot of other people at Catapult Lakeland are proving, that if you have a passion for something, that the food industry there's a huge opportunity there, and especially when you're positively affecting people with what you sell, like you are. And the other point that I wanted to make that you just touched on is to carry yourself through the really difficult times. It's huge to have a passion for what you're doing.
It's imperative. If you don't have a passion for what you're starting, you will be one of the statistics. I really believe that by the 5-year mark, you'll be one of the statistics that, this was a startup that just fizzled. And I think a lot of times it's because the passion is great in the beginning when, things are starting to happen. It's exciting. But then you're going to have these periods of time where it's just doing what you do every day. And you have to have a passion for it to have that be enough. because things will take off and grow, but it doesn't always happen every single day. Every single day I don't necessarily get an email from a company saying, hey, I found out about your product, I'd really like to know about carrying it in my store. That doesn't happen every day. Some days I'm just going in and somebody emailed me and said, hey, I'm going to be at the market, would you make me 4 cheese pizzas to pick up that I can take home and sure, yeah, they'll be ready for you. Sometimes that's as exciting as it gets, and so you have to have passion for what you're doing so that when it's not exciting and a big adventure, that you still have this desire to move forward and keep it going and keep that momentum going, and not just say, oh, this is not going anywhere, I made the same amount as I did last week.
Yeah, absolutely, because the entrepreneurial lifestyle does sound very glamorous, which a lot of parts of it is, but there's also the stuff that people don't see. What's that saying? 10 overnight success, 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
There's a
Absolutely.
lot of very hard work that goes into it. The other thing that I wanted to make a specific point about that you had touched on is the education piece of it, educating yourself. I can't tell you how many different entrepreneurs that I've talked to that have gotten into a situation where they hired a web development company to create them a $10,000 website, and come to find out it's only worth a fraction of that. Doing the research on the front end, yes, so that you're not taking advantage of on the back end.
Right.
Is there a recommendation that you have for people as far as formulating their marketing message or their branding message?
Yeah, I will tell you something that I learned sort of the hard way, because being sort of a DIYer, there's a lot of the stuff that I tried to do myself. For instance, we started originally selling the mixes online on my blog site, which was just a little rinky-dink site. Not ashamed to say that it's rinky-dink.
Probably gets a lot of traffic, though.
Well, probably more so now, but yeah, that has more to do with the product than the website.
Good point.
But I didn't know what I was doing, but I thought, oh, I could do this. And what you don't always think about is that, there's so many things that go into what draws the eye, that, yes, be educated, yes, be choosy in how you spend those advertising, marketing, development dollars. I'm not saying to be, frivolous with them, because it can, like you said, you can get taken advantage of if you don't know what you're doing. But I will tell you, things that we have invested in that have really paid off is getting a professional photographer to do some product pictures. Yeah, mine were all right. But when you compare it to what the website looks now, with these professional quality shots of people actually eating my product, not some stock photo of somebody eating a cupcake.
Sure.
Or these are actual photos that were done by a professional. Seeing the return on the value of spending that bit of money, which in the beginning I was nervous, do I really need professional photos? Why aren't these good enough? I mean, all that doubt that you have. And I finally bit the bullet and said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I haven't regretted it. So it's educating yourself, and then really picking and choosing those things that will really take it to the next level, because you do have to spend money to make money. And I've made some, stumbles along the way, and, got some apps for like WooCommerce and things that were way too technical for me to be able to figure out, and I spent the money and they don't refund it, so but you have to remember, when you make those mistakes, that is part of the learning process too, and you can't beat yourself up over the fact that, yes, this was here's a prime example. I label all of my own packaging right now, because it's still cheaper to get the labels and put them on myself than it is to have the company put the labels on the package. So that's one way that we have a little bit of cost savings. Well, each one of those labels costs X amount of money. Well, one rolled up on itself and destroyed the label. And
Oh, wow.
immediately I get this, oh, I just wasted X amount of money. Yeah, but the next time I was a little more careful and I learned. So you got to remember that, we learn more from mistakes than we do from our successes necessarily, because we don't take time to really think about sometimes how we got to our successes. But when we make a mistake, we think about it.
Absolutely.
So remember that in the process, and don't beat yourself up too hard for the mistakes. Yeah, they can make you cry. Yeah, you can think, oh, why did I do that? But don't let it slow you down. Just, what can I learn from this? How can I do it better the next time? And knowing, educating yourself ahead of time is not going to prevent every mistake. Just know that, and then forgive yourself and move on. Some of those things are going to lead to even bigger successes than you would have had if you hadn't made the first mistake.
Yeah, I love it. Jeff Bezos is famous for saying that they've made billions of dollars of mistakes, and Amazon, obviously the goal is not to make mistakes, but you can't, like you said, you cannot have those successes unless you're trying new things and trying different things. Now, in the food services industry, if someone is thinking about starting a business in the food services industry, is there anything in specific from an industry's perspective that they may want to watch out for?
Number one, food industry, the margins are pretty narrow to begin with. So making sure that you get your pricing right is really crucial. Understanding who your customer is so that you market to, you really target the market. Yeah, you can take the shotgun approach where you're just like machine gunning, trying to get it coverage to everyone. But when you focus in and target in on your specific clientele, the word of mouth spreads much faster than shotgunning all over,
Excellent.
So I think
it's also a lot cheaper marketing too.
Yeah, and I think that's something that it took me a minute or two to actually have sink in for me, and because I originally started out with sort of the machine gun approach where I was just shooting out emails and shooting out advertisements, and because I didn't know what I was doing, I was just trying to get the word out.
Yeah.
But and again, it went back to sort of co-starters and having a support network of saying, hey, did you know that you can actually focus in on the kind of people that are probably interested in hearing from you?
Yep.
And that's really key, because if you don't hone in on who your client is, your product's not going to sell. I can market to people that are doing vegan till the cows come home, and they're not going to be my client, no matter how pretty I make the package, no matter how many, nice emails or discount coupons I send them, because my product doesn't meet their need.
That's a great point. And if you are an entrepreneur out there and you're doing something like paid advertising or email marketing or whatever it is that you're doing, just remember, before you decide that this doesn't work, a lot of the time, like Darla said, you are marketing to the wrong person. I cannot tell you how many times I've looked at a Facebook ad campaign and the person who created it is convinced that Facebook ads don't work. But it's the fact that you're
not
advertising
targeting the right clientele,
to the right person, and then also knowing who your clientele is.
Right.
I think from what I can see, you've got a really solid understanding about who's looking for your products and what they're looking for. Can you speak a little bit more to, from a technology perspective, what has been the most challenging? Because in today's world, for any industry that you're in, technology can be one of the biggest roadblocks, or it can also be one of the biggest helps for a new business. What's been your experience?
The tech side of it has been the most challenging for me, and that was setting up the storefront, because there's a lot that we take for granted. We all shop Amazon.
Sure.
And you click a button, it ships to you. You don't think about it. When you are setting up a storefront, there is not only product descriptions, do you have SKUs, do you have barcoding, because there's like GS1. I mean, if you ever decide that you want to sell on Amazon, you have to have a GS1 barcode, was it UPC code for every product. That's a cost because they have to research your product, and then it is assigned the code that is that product forever. Nobody else will have that UPC code. So I mean, there's things that you just don't even necessarily know to ask that were learning curves for me. Setting up the tech side, how do you make it offer free shipping for if they purchase over $60 worth of product? How do I make the shop do that? So those were some big obstacles for me, and you know, it's been a learning experience. I have a little bit of an advantage because I happen to be married to a software developer.
And
so when I get really stuck.
and I wanted to make sure that we mentioned Andy's business because I'll let you speak briefly about that.
Well, we have a company also called Durand Innovations, and basically it is the umbrella for all the different app projects that he has. Most particularly, he has a software that he developed that increases the productivity of process servers that, you know, when you get served to, you know, show up in court or whatever, process servers. He developed a software that automates that process and gets rid of some of the stuff that was having to be done manually by a person. So small businesses, especially the company in particular that I'm thinking of, they increased their productivity by 400% using the software to automate some of those things that they were doing by hand.
That's incredible.
And his is an advantage over what's out there currently in that his is all cloud-based, which means that if, you know, they're out in the field serving papers, they get another service or whatever, or they have to stop by an attorney and pick up papers or whatever, that's all right there in the cloud from their cell phone or their iPad or whatever, which is a big advantage over having to go back to the office, look at the desktop, see what the workload is, you know.
Yeah. And I definitely want to be respectful of your time, but I do have to ask, what is it like having two entrepreneurs in a household, and how does that dynamic work? Just you know, maybe there may be someone out there that they are the entrepreneur and their significant others, but just from that dynamic, how does that work for you guys?
Well, we had to, number one, make sure that in each kitchen there was only one primary chef. That was the first thing that had to happen, and we struggled a little bit at first because we're both, obviously, to be doing what we're doing, are very strong people. Very independent leaders, and so, you know, having too many chefs can ruin the product. So basically, because his understanding of what he does on the tech side, I'm more of come up with concepts and designs on his side of the business. I'm the one that tests it out, and if I say this is crap because it's not user friendly, because again, it's a forest for the trees kind of a thing, where he's been in software for over 30 years. You know, it's really no brainer to him. It looks super simple. I get on there and I'm like, I have no idea how to make this work. And so he's learned that to listen to that, because I'm average Joe when it comes to technology. So if I can sit down and it's intuitive for me to use a product that he has designed, he knows that probably anybody of reasonable intelligence can figure it out. If I'm looking at it and going, oh, there's no way, I can't, I have no idea what I'm doing here, then he knows that he needs to go back to the drawing board.
That's
and
great.
So that helps. The other thing for me on my side is I'm the director of the kitchen. He does give me a lot of feedback, and again, it's forest for the trees. Sometimes I'm in the middle of it, and he'll just say to me, that's a really bad idea. Well, but no, just for a minute, let me just tell you, if I was coming to the market and blah, 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 this is what I would think. And it's because he's not in the thick of it all the time. So in that regard, it's really nice to have that sort of in-house. sort of that checks and balance. And we're very supportive of each other.
Getting the family members involved.
Right.
With the business. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, neither one of us are big fans of the sort of the paperwork side of things. So it's kind of nice to not have to be the one that has to do it all the time.
Sure.
To be able to say, okay, it's your turn this week. You're doing the bookkeeping.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I really feel like in some ways we bit off way more than we could chew in having two very, very different businesses. But at the same time, we're finding that it's complementing, being able to come to each other. And some weeks, I will take a little more time and focus more on helping him, like getting marketing out for his product, suggestions, looking at what he's done. And by the same token, he's my favorite tester. So, anything new I come up with, he taste tests.
That's great. One thing that you did touch on, biting off more that you can chew, having your goals that may be at the current present time past your capacity or past your skill set or past your expertise. I'm not saying that about you for any of those. I'm saying this for the entrepreneur at home. Having that be the case is a good thing, in my opinion, because you're constantly pushing yourself. You're constantly pushing yourself to become better, and your business, your skill set, it will catch up with you. And the last thing that I want to ask you, Darla, is how can people best get in contact with you, and how can they buy some of your incredible food?
Well, our website is noguiltbaking.com. Pretty easy to find. You can find us also on Facebook. I'm in transition with the Facebook name. It's still under Carb Junkie on Keto. It's going to be No Guilt Baking Company, but we also still we're migrating the blog at Carb Junkie on Keto is going to migrate over to the No Guilt Baking also. So either one of those two places at this point in time can still find us. People can email me directly, Darla at noguiltbaking.com. Sorry. They can email me directly. They can contact me through Facebook. They can contact me through the website. Or come see me Saturday at the Lakeland Downtown Curbside Farmers Market. We're there almost every Saturday.
I'll be there this Saturday. And one last thing that I wanted to say that I really appreciate Darla talking about was the networking. There are a lot of meetups in your local area. Go to them. Start networking with other entrepreneurs because you don't know what you don't know. Networking with people that have done it already can be a huge help.
Well, another thing, just to tag on to that just slightly, there are a couple of people in the area that are starting up sort of low-carb keto food businesses. And some people may think that I would be like, oh, no, they're my competition. I'm not helping them. But in fact, what I have found to be true in the entrepreneur kind of community is people are less likely to feel afraid of the competition and more likely to offer and extend help. I've not encountered anybody even doing something similar to what I'm doing that has been like, well, I'm not talking to you and give away my trade secrets.
Right.
You don't have to give away trade secrets to offer some support and a helping hand and some advice. There is plenty of room out there. Look at how many people are out there and how different we all are. There is room for everyone to come out there and do what they're passionate about.
I love it. I love it. In my industry, the open source is that version, but I absolutely love it. Okay, well, Darla, thank you very much. I really appreciate you doing this interview with me.
Yeah,
Any help that I can be, please let me know. And again, if you are interested in becoming an entrepreneur, I highly recommend that you take the example and the inspiration from people like Darla, and I appreciate you doing what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darla.
for having me.